2:37 in the morning. Somewhere in occupied Luhansk, a Russian military freight train is rolling northwest through total darkness. Fuel, ammunition, supplies for Russian frontline formations. The locomotive doing 43 kilometers an hour, steel wheels grinding over worn rail joints, the driver and his assistant trading tired words in the cab. From inside that train, everything looks completely routine. It is not routine. Several kilometers away, inside a concealed command position, operators from Ukraine's 414th Unmanned Systems Brigade are watching a small icon move slowly across a digital map. They've already done the math. They know the train's speed. They know its cargo. They know exactly where it has to go, because trains don't get to choose. They follow tracks, and these operators have been waiting at the end of those tracks for hours. The train has no idea it's already dead. The 414th Brigade, Magyar Birds, didn't find this train by accident. Modern military intelligence doesn't work like the movies. There's no single moment where someone dramatically points at a screen and says, "There." What actually happens is more boring and more lethal. Rail node observations over days, departure timing patterns, load estimates based on wagon type and order, thermal checks from forward reconnaissance drones, signal intercepts from rail communications. Individually, each piece looks like administrative paperwork. Together, they form a firing solution. That is how modern ambushes begin, not with heroics, with spreadsheets and radio discipline. The operators had already identified the choke point, near the Sverdlovsk municipal district, outside Dovzhansk, a curve that opens into a straight segment, shallow embankments on both sides, and a gap in the local air defense coverage that the Russian side either didn't notice or couldn't fix before this particular night. The window was open, the train was coming. Magyar's Birds were ready. This was not a single drone operation. Magyar's Birds brought a package. The primary strike element was FP2 type drones, medium range, carrying warheads in the 60 to 100 kilogram class. To put that in perspective, your average FPV drone that you've seen in footage across this war carries a warhead of maybe a few kilograms. The FP2 carries between 60 and 100. These are not angry toys. They are flying demolition charges with cameras and guidance systems and enough terminal energy to end a freight car's entire career in one visit. Supporting them were smaller FPV drones for route confirmation, target identification, and damage assessment after the strike. Think of it as the main act and the crew that checks the work afterward. And here's what separates professional drone warfare from a lucky shot. Sequencing. In the same operational window, elsewhere in the region, other Ukrainian unmanned assets were simultaneously hunting a Russian S-300V air defense launcher and a separate logistics hub. Not accidents. Deliberate. Force the Russian defenders to answer 3 problems at once, and statistically they answer at least one of them badly. In this case, they answered all 3 badly, but let's stay with the train for now. The Ukrainian drones were built for an environment where Russia would try to stop them. Frequency hopping control links that dance across radio bands fast enough to complicate narrow band jamming. Inertial navigation units that keep a dead reckoning estimate when GPS gets spoofed. Some platforms preload waypoints for part of the route, then transition back to operator control in the terminal approach. Russia's primary defense against Ukrainian drones has always been electronic warfare. GPS spoofing, signal jamming, cutting the connection between drone and operator. The way to defeat that is to build drones that don't need the signal. GPS spoofing is a lie told to a machine about where it is. Jamming is just screaming loudly enough that the machine can't hear. But inertial navigation is the machine checking its own homework, measuring its own acceleration and movement through space. Spoof the satellite picture all you want. The drone banked left, climbed 20 meters, accelerated by 3 meters per second squared, and Newton is still sitting in the back of the classroom with his arms crossed. Physics doesn't care about your EW system. At 2:44 in the morning, a Russian electronic warfare team in the sector finally noticed something unusual on the spectrum. Not a clean target, not a dramatic flashing red icon, just enough noise and irregularity on the bands to make somebody sit up straighter and put down their T. They switched from passive monitoring to active jamming, flooding likely drone control frequencies across a broad footprint. On paper, this sounds like a meaningful defensive response. In practice, it was like trying to swat mosquitoes by setting your own living room on fire. Broad jamming creates chaos, but it also creates blind spots. And, the classic Russian military specialty, it makes every system step on every other system. The local jammer started interfering with its own sector's communications. An air defense team assumed the neighboring sector was monitoring. The neighboring sector assumed the rail corridor was low priority. Somewhere in that handoff between assumptions, 7 minutes of reaction time disappeared. One Ukrainian strike drone temporarily lost clean satellite positioning and dropped into inertial-assisted routing. It kept flying. Another shifted its hopping pattern. A smaller FPV scout climbed to roughly 180 meters for better line of sight. Saw the jamming bloom on its signal diagnostics, confirmed the train was still on heading, and relayed the geometry update. Tiny adjustments, 2 degrees left, nose down 5 meters, speed 152 kilometers per hour. The whole thing is less Top Gun and more surgical plumbing with explosives. Meanwhile, the Russian air defense crew nearest the corridor was looking for large, clean signatures. Helicopters, aircraft, cruise missiles. The radar software was designed to care about those things. Low, intermittent, clutter-hugging attackers the size of household appliances moving against ground return at 2 in the morning? Not really in the threat profile they were built for. In the cab, the locomotive driver received a vague advisory about possible UAV activity in the wider area. That is the kind of warning that becomes background noise after 2 years of war. Possible activity is not intelligence. Possible activity is weather. The driver pushed on. At 2:46, the intercept locked. The lead strike drone approached from the rear quarter of the train. Low first, then a slight climb to clear wake turbulence and line up on the first priority target. A fuel tank car near the center of the consist. The operator watching the feed as the target swelled. Black cylindrical tank, ladder silhouette, glinting metal hardware, steel skin. The warhead is heavy enough that perfection isn't required, but precision multiplies effect. Hit too high and you waste blast energy. Hit too low and you punch through with less internal vapor ignition. Hit center mass at the right angle and the inside of that tank car becomes a physics demonstration. The first impact landed at 2:46 and some seconds. Hard white flash, then a bloom. Metal ruptured, internal pressure spiked, fuel aerosolized and ignited. Temperatures in the combustion zone jumped into the thousands of degrees Celsius almost immediately. The fireball expanded outward and upward, then rolled along the train's length in a sheet of incandescent vapor and black smoke. The tank shell didn't politely leak. It tore, peeled, vented burning fuel in every direction. Overpressure slammed into adjacent wagons. Steel fittings became shrapnel. Paint vanished. In the cab, the driver and his assistant felt the shock through the frame before they fully understood what had just happened. Then the second drone arrived. The second drone struck a different fuel car, further down the consist from a slightly offset angle. That detail matters more than it sounds. A train is a connected system. Buffers, couplers, brake lines, pressure equalization paths, confined spacing between wagons. Once fire and blast start walking the consist, each car becomes a delivery service for the next problem. Burning fuel poured downward, pooling beneath axles and sleepers. Flames ran along undercarriage lines. Hot fragments peppered adjacent cars. The blast wave ricocheted between steel bodies and the embankment wall. The train tried to brake, but braking in panic under damaged load with several thousand tons of momentum is not a clean maneuver. It kept moving. Russian personnel on nearby escort positions now saw the drones clearly, which was unfortunately too late to be useful. Small arms fire cracked from security points. A machine gun opened up in short bursts. The tracers looked dramatic in the dark. They achieved very little. Hitting a maneuvering drone at night while it closes at over 140 kilometers per hour is already difficult. Doing it while your comms are being stepped on by your own jammer, your sight picture is contaminated by firelight, and your train is actively becoming a rolling volcano is something between poor tactics and performance art. A smaller Ukrainian FPV dove in behind the first strikes to assess damage. The feed showed ruptured tank shells, a spreading linear fire, and at least least one ammunition wagon already catching secondary flame exposure. The operator called it ammunition involvement imminent, and then the train really lost the argument. The first ammunition car cooked off. Not one giant movie explosion, but a hideous sequence of sympathetic detonations. Propellant burned, packed munitions burst, shock from one compartment triggered another, fragmentation sliced outward in cones and arcs. Then a larger internal detonation arrived and the whole wagon seemed to lift and unzip itself. Blast wave punched along the rail bed. Secondary explosions began arriving out of rhythm, irregular and psychologically worse, because nobody on the Russian side could tell whether the next one was the last or the beginning of something much bigger. The driver and his assistant were injured. The locomotive survived the first inferno in the technical sense of the word survive. Glass blown, metal fragments in the cab area. Whatever schedule existed 5 minutes ago no longer existed in any meaningful sense. Here's where the story gets bigger than the fire. A single tank car carries tens of tons of fuel. Even if only several fuel wagons were fully destroyed, the loss runs into hundreds of tons. A battalion-sized grouping of armored and support vehicles can burn through tens of tons of diesel per day, depending on operational tempo, generator usage, and recovery operations. Do that math, and you start to understand why frontline Russian units care deeply about one supply train they never saw. Add the ammunition cargo, artillery shells, rocket propellant, package charges, and then add wagon losses, track damage, locomotive repair, emergency response, line closure, and rerouting costs. A handful of drones that cost a fraction of a single artillery shell just deleted cargo and infrastructure worth millions. It's the kind of exchange ratio that makes accountants cry and makes generals invent creative new excuses for their reports. Somewhere in occupied Luhansk, a Russian officer is currently writing the phrase unforeseen technical complications in a report that is entirely about a train that is on fire. But the real cost isn't on the balance sheet. It's the delay. Ammunition that arrives late doesn't support the unit that needed it an hour earlier. Fuel held behind a block stretch of rail doesn't help vehicles already waiting at the line of contact. Once the line is disrupted, replacement cargo has to be sourced, loaded, and rerouted by road, which is slower, riskier, and considerably more visible to the same drones that just burned the train. Sections of railbed were scorched under pooling fuel fires hot enough to warp components and compromise track geometry. Steel rail doesn't need to melt to become unusable. Heat distortion, sleeper damage, and ballast contamination are plenty. Repairs become a full-line restoration job. Engineers, cranes, replacement rail, signaling checks, clearance teams for unexploded ordnance. That takes days. And during those days, frontline units discover that operational confidence runs on diesel more than speeches. Here's what makes rail logistics uniquely valuable and uniquely fragile in this war. Trains are efficient. They move large volumes of cargo over long distances faster and more reliably than road transport. Russia's entire logistics system in Luhansk and Donetsk depends heavily on rail. It has to. The distances are too long and the volumes too large for trucks to handle alone. But trains can't leave the track. Russia knew this when it built its logistics around rail. The efficiency was worth the vulnerability until Ukrainian drone operators figured out how to read a timetable. The choke points are documented on every railway map ever printed. This is the trap Russia built for itself when it became dependent on rail resupply. Give a Ukrainian intelligence team enough time to observe departure patterns, wagon types, and rail node timing, and they don't have a moving target anymore. They have an appointment. The thermal cameras made it worse. Ukrainian FPV units operating in this sector use drones equipped with thermal imaging that scans wide areas continuously. These systems don't rely on visible light. Trees, shadows, ground terrain that once provided cover, they lose most of their value when a sensor sees heat. The locomotive glowed brightest against the cold ground below. Fuel wagons showed uneven surface temperatures based on fill levels and metal thickness. The ammunition cars were less distinct but still there, in exactly the order intelligence had predicted. At 2:37 in the morning, on a dark stretch of occupied rail line, the train thought darkness was protection. It wasn't darkness, it was a background that made the locomotive shine like a beacon on a thermal feed. The train that left its depot on the night of March 12th was carrying fuel for vehicles, ammunition for guns, and the quiet assumption that Russian logistics in Luhansk were still operating normally. All three things died in roughly the same time frame. Magyar Birds launched a strike package that cost a fraction of what a single missile cost, hit a target that was structurally incapable of evading them, and produced delays and material losses that will ripple through Russian frontline capability for days. The locomotive driver probably thought he was doing the most routine thing in the world. Moving cargo at night through territory Russia has held for years. The kind of run you stop thinking about after you've done it enough times. That's exactly when the drone finds you. Because Ukrainian operators aren't looking for dramatic targets. They're looking for confident ones, for movement that stopped questioning whether tonight is safe, for a train rolling at 43 kilometers an hour through what someone decided was a low-priority corridor. The track goes where the track goes, the drone goes where you go. Magyar Birds set a record in March 2026, 23,773 strike sorties, 15,951 enemy targets. The train near Luhansk was one line in that ledger. There's a next train on that line, there's a next night, and somewhere in a concealed command position, there's a small icon on a digital map that's already moving.